All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. Welcome to this morning's Heritage Kingston meeting. It's now 9:30, and Mr. Chair, I do see that we have quorum. I just want to check in and see Janine O'Reilly is joining us via phone. I just want to make sure that we can hear her before we get started. So Janine, are you able to hear me? Oh, I believe you just muted yourself. If you can press *6 again, just to see that we can hear you.
I can hear you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Chair, with that, I'm just going to do a brief introduction just to let everyone know who is joining us this morning in the meeting. So joining us from the committee are Peter Gower as chair, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Osterhoff, Jane McFarland, Donald Mitchell, Janine O'Reilly, Ted Smith, and Donald Taylor. Missing this morning currently is Jennifer Demeter, who should hopefully be joining us soon. Oh, there's Jennifer there. Perfect. I see you, Jennifer, waving at me. Excellent. And Moya Doonville should hopefully be joining us shortly as well. We have received regrets from Paul Banfield. Joining us from staff are Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Philip Perrell, Intermediate Planner, Alex Rouse-Thompson, Planner, myself, Elizabeth Fawcett, as Committee Clerk, and Julia McCarty-Jansman is joining us as host this morning. We have approximately 5 to 6 property owners and agents who are also participating this morning, as well as 4 members of the public watching from the gallery. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over to you to begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So calling to order at about 9:33. You have an agenda. We have to add to it the communications which you received this morning under the correspondence under 12. I also would like to add under other business an update on Princess Street United Church. Are there any other additions that people want to make to the agenda? And seeing none, then I will ask for a mover for the agenda as amended. Councillor Doherty, Donald Mitchell, further discussion? Seeing none, then you have a vote. Those in favour of the amended agenda. And I see all hands, I believe. Those opposed? Okay. Yep, thank you, Councillor. You have an agenda. We have 2 sets of minutes to look after. July the 21st. Are there any comments, changes, or anything on the July 21st set of minutes? And seeing none, I will ask for a mover to approve those minutes. Somebody who was present at the meeting. Jane McFarland, seconded by Don Taylor. Further discussion? And seeing none, those in favour? And I see all hands, and thank you very much. And Madam Clerk, I'm assuming that if Janine has a comment, she will comment through you, is that right?
Mr. Chair, Janine will use the raise hand function in order to indicate if she wishes to speak. You should be able to see that through the Zoom platform.
Good. Thank you. And secondly, the minutes of September the 15th, 2021. Firstly, let's get a mover and a seconder, because I know there's going to be a slight amendment coming up. So a mover for these minutes. Councillor Doherty, and seconder Don Taylor. And Mr. Taylor, you have asked for a slight change in these minutes. You need to unmute yourself, I think, Don. There we go.
Yes, on page 6, where it says Mr. Taylor expressed support, etc. I think better wording would be Mr. Taylor hoped that balusters would be installed on the King Street port steps. noting that they may be required under the building code.
Good, thank you. And I believe the clerk has that wording. Any other changes, amendments, questions on those minutes? And seeing none, then those in favour of the amended minutes of September the 15th, please raise your hands. Those opposed, and those minutes are carried and approved. Thank you very much. One more book to get out of the way. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. And if you realize during the meeting that you did not state that and you should have done, please do so as soon as you realize. Presentations, delegations, briefings. Sorry, Jane, were you waving then? No. Briefings. Business, cultural heritage. I have nothing noted for cultural heritage, policy development, or heritage assets. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Good, thank you. So we move on to statutory business, 482, 488 Division Street. And I believe, Alex, you're introducing this one for us.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, welcome.
I'll wait for my, thank you, I'll wait for my presentation. Here we go. So this is an application for the property at 488. It does actually include 482, but just for clarity, there was a approved consent for the property, but unfortunately the conditions lapsed. So it is still one property, which includes 42 and 48. So it's an application for alteration under Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act to install painted black metal fencing along the front of the property, which is the east property line facing Division Street. Next slide, please. The property is located on the west side of Division Street, just north of Concession and south of Guy Street. Next slide, please. The property contains a 1.5-story stone house, which was constructed sometime between 1860 and 1878. Next slide, please. So the property was designated under Part 4 of the Act in 2017. It is a good example of a classically balanced stone house. It is also associated with John Bryant Jr., a farmer, horse driver, and stone dealer who constructed the house and lived in it with his wife and daughters. You'll see a list of cultural heritage attributes, all to do with the exterior of the building, its massing, its chimneys, window openings, that sort of a thing. It does include a 1-story log building that was in the rear yard, but unfortunately that was demolished since this designation bylaw was completed. Next slide, please. So staff visited the property in September. So this property is located on a busy arterial road. There's heavy car traffic, foot traffic, and the 1.5-story house is situated very close to the city of Kingston's right-of-way, approximately 3.3 meters back from the property line. In the absence of any sort of specific municipal policies or guidelines for fencing on historic properties, staff reviewed the City of Kingston's bylaw to regulate fences, as well as the old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan and Parks Canada standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. So this dotted red line is just there to help you sort of get a sense of where the proposed fencing will be situated. To the left of the image for you, you'll see there's quite a bit of greenery. Within that greenery is currently a chain link fence. So the new fencing is to kind of pick up where that ends and carry across the driveway and then in front of the house to the other side of the north property line where it would meet with the adjacent property owner's fence. Next slide, please. So the proposed fencing complies, and again, this is just the survey of the property showing you the 2 locations of the 5-foot fencing to the front on the east property line. So the fence does comply with the City of Kingston's fence bylaw, which limits the height of fences to 1.8 meters or 6 feet. So this is a 5-foot fence that's being proposed. As a result, it will not obscure the heritage building or any of its attributes noted in the designation bylaw. Additionally, along the northern end of the front property line, the land rises slightly up from the sidewalk. So the house is slightly risen up. As a result, the fencing will be even less visually intrusive on views of this house. The vertical railing style will also ensure better visibility of the house and its attributes, because obviously it'll allow some transparency through there, in contrast to, say, a closed boarded fence, for example. So the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District advises that fencing on private property should be of high quality and constructed of wood, iron, or stone. Again, these guidelines were designed for the Old Sydenham area, but certainly I think the idea that fencing should be traditional and have a high quality appearance on a heritage property is relevant, and staff are confident that the painted black metal vertical railing will accomplish this goal. Next slide, please. So section 4.1 in the standards and guidelines does include guidelines for cultural landscapes. Although the subject property is not identified as a cultural heritage landscape, the introduction to this section does speak to the important contribution of setting to buildings, as well as how setting often corresponds to the visible boundaries of a site. So in this instance, the installation of fencing has the potential to impact the setting of this building, whether negatively or positively. And having reviewed the height and design of the proposed fencing, heritage planning staff are satisfied that the fencing will have a neutral, possibly positive impact on the cultural heritage value and character of the property. The applicant has provided an indication of the style of fencing they'd like to install, which is in front of you, which is supportable. However, a condition has been included that requires the finalized fencing design details to be submitted to heritage planning staff for review. This is to ensure that the final selection falls within the supportable parameters of height, transparency, and being painted black. In summary, the proposed fencing will not detract from the heritage building or its attributes and is a reversible alteration. In terms of comments from our technical review, everybody internally was happy. It complies with the fence bylaw. Responding members from Heritage Kingston provided they had no concerns with the fence so long as it is painted black. And additionally, one member commented that it should be sturdy and securely installed given the high foot traffic along Division Street. If we move to the next slide, we'll have the recommendation in front of you, which is quite simple. I would add that condition 2 is a little bit of an oversight on my part, as there won't be a building permit required for this installation, but condition 3 does require the finalized details of the design to be submitted to staff nonetheless. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I'm just wondering whether you needed to change that clause 2 or whether it makes sense as it is.
I mean, it's sort of redundant, so I'm happy if someone wants to suggest that it's removed.
But it makes sense as it makes sense as it stands anyway.
Yes, it's fine. Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you. Committee, questions, comments, thoughts? Oh, very good. Oh, that's what we like. You know, that's great. It shows the work that the that staff have done. In that case, I look for a mover to approve the recommendation as printed. 1 recommendation and 4 conditions.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, before we go to moving the recommendation, if we could just turn to members of the public in case there's any questions or anything additional members of the public would like to add. I do see that Samuel Dahan, who is, I believe, the property owner, may wish to speak.
Okay, members of the public wishing to speak.
I don't have anything to add.
And I don't see any hands there at all.
I don't either, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, let's go back then to looking for a mover and a seconder for the motion as printed. Moved by Jennifer Demeter, seconded by Don Mitchell. Further discussion? And seeing none, those in favor of the recommendation as printed, if you can raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it all moved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favor
That
and
includes
against.
Ms. O'Reilly as well, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Ms. O'Reilly has her hand raised in favor.
Thank you. So that's 9 in favor and none opposed then. And that is carried. So thank you, Alex and Ona, for that. And we move on to '35 Brock Street.
That's me as well, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And we are now in part 5s.
Correct. We're in Market Square Heritage Conservation District.
Yep, good.
So thank you. So we have an application for both demolition and alteration under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, which is to request approval to demolish the rear additions as well as portions of the rear stone wall and gable roof on the original building, and to construct a 3-story rear addition and to restore the facade of the original building. So it's quite a project. Slide 2, please. So the property is located on the north side of Brock Street, east of Ontario Street and west of King Street East, and it is adjacent to the Springer Market Square. Slide 3, please. The subject property contains a 2.5-story limestone building constructed around 1840. It's now known as the Matheson Atkinson building. Next slide, please. The property was designated as part of the Market Square Heritage Conservation District back in 1985. The 2013 Market Square Heritage Conservation District Plan notes that this property is a representative example of commercial construction in Kingston from the early to mid 1800s. The property has historical or associative value due to its association with Henry Matheson and William and Mary Atkinson. And lastly, the building has contextual value because of its contribution to the evolved character of the Market Square District. According to the district plan, there are 3 key exterior attributes that embody this heritage value, which includes the rubble stone facade divided into 5 bays, the second floor window openings with a flat-headed segmented arch and stone sill, and the shed roof with sidewall parapets and gable style dormers. I will just add that the heritage impact statement that accompanied this application, which is authored by Andre Scheinman, did clarify that the property's roof is a side gable roof and not a shed roof, as noted before. However, we believe that the sort of emphasis on the shed roof has to do with the fact that the front portion of the roof is really what is critical in this situation. Next slide, please. So staff visited the site on 2 different occasions, both in August and also in September, to meet with the architect, the builder, and the property owner. The owner is keen to rehabilitate this property to improve both the restaurant experience as well as to provide high quality residential units, both of which will help to ensure the long-term conservation of this building. The subject property certainly does form part of a significant historic streetscape and is perimeter to the Market Square Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. So to facilitate the internal improvements of the restaurant to construct the new 3-story addition, demolition of the existing rear 1- and 2-story additions, as well as the rear roof slope of the original building and portions of the rear stone wall and side east parapet wall will be required to facilitate that new addition. Section 5.4 demolition in the district plan clearly states that the City of Kingston does not support demolition in part or whole of an existing building within the district. However, in this specific situation, the majority of the demolition pertains to the relatively contemporary 1- and 2-story additions to the rear, as well as the rear roof slope and wall of the original building, none of which are listed as heritage attributes on the subject property. Next slide, please. As noted in Andre Scheinman's heritage impact statement, the rear stone wall of the original building was heavily modified during the 1960s renovation of the property, as well as at ground level. So the rear stone wall was completely removed at ground level for the 1-story addition. The proposal includes retaining as much of the existing rear stone wall within the new residential units as possible. Additionally, the retention of the front slope of the gable roof with the original pegged peak connection will ensure that if there is a desire to restore the roof of the original building, that it can be informed by the original existing roof. Nonetheless, staff have included a condition requiring that the property be well photographically documented prior to demolition, including all the rear additions and rear roof. Next slide, please. So an important component of the rehabilitation of this building is the restoration of the facade facing Springer Market Square. The intention is to repair the facade with the following new interventions: reopening the 5th window on the 2nd floor, the installation of all new windows and doors, the like-for-like replacement of the 3rd floor dormer windows, and the installation of new roofing on the gable roof. The rear portion of the roof will be removed to accommodate the flat roof addition. However, the connection of the new addition will occur several inches. Sorry, I think we've skipped oh no, we're good. Will occur several inches past the peak in order to preserve the original pegged peak connection. So this will ensure that the appearance of an authentic side gable roof is conserved on the front of the building. The front slope of the roof has experienced a degree of settlement and deformation, but according to the HIS, the proposal is to preserve the original roof structure through sistering and removal of decayed sections and scarfing in of sound material with replacement kept to a minimum. Additionally, the original gable style dormer windows on the south elevation are seriously decayed and do require reconstruction. So they will be built like for like in material, size, massing, design, but with the new introduction of wood shingles on the side walls of them, as well as a standing seam metal roof. New materials on the facade will be limited to aluminum clad wood windows on the ground and second floor levels, standing seam metal roof, and wood shingles on the sidewalls of the gable. The district plan states that any new materials that are introduced when altering the existing building shall be physically and visually compatible with its heritage attributes. So the proposed new materials are robust and traditional in their character and will complement the existing stonework and wooden architectural detailing present on the building. And the last part of this, the restoration of the front, includes the repair and repainting of the existing wooden architectural detailing the facade. And additionally, all the exterior limestone will be repointed in appropriate lime-based mortar, including the stone chimneys, parapet wall, and corbels. And any necessary replacements of stone units will be like for like. Next slide, please. So the district plan states that the form and pattern of period windows and door openings shall be conserved. So this application proposes to maintain all the existing form and pattern of the window and door openings, obviously with the addition of that opening up of the previously infilled second floor window. And as the HIS notes, this will restore the 5-bay rhythm of the original design and greatly improve the heritage appearance of this building. So the existing windows on the ground floor, and as well as the door in the second floor windows, although they appear to be, older windows and they are wood windows, they are not original or paired windows, and they were believed to have been installed sometime in the mid-1980s or later. So the new windows are proposed to be aluminum clad wood windows. The second floor and dormer windows, the second floor and dormer windows include 6/6, as well as 2/2 patterning respectively. And the restaurant storefront windows are vertically divided with a horizontal division in the upper quarter. So these are traditional and appropriate configurations for the historic building and comply with the window policy. The final components of the repair and restoration relate to the restaurant and storefront. So there'll be a new retractable canvas awning as proposed. The existing wooden fascia board signage will be repaired and repainted, but in the future it won't include the CASA lettering. And alternatively, they are proposing a new hanging sign, at which the details of which will come forward at a later date. New exterior lighting is proposed and includes 4 simple black lighting fixtures that are positioned between the windows and the door and will not overwhelm the building or conceal heritage attributes. Lastly, the application proposes reparging the existing infill wall at the ground and second floor levels between 35 and 33 Brock Street, which is adjacent to the east. This is just to simply clean up its appearance. One Heritage Kingston member noted that stucco may also be an appropriate material. I would say arguably parging and stucco will have a similar appearance, and staff are comfortable with either option and will include a condition that details of the selected material are submitted to Heritage Planning staff for review. Next slide, please. So section 5.3 of the plan addresses the design of new construction, including additions. It explains that buildings within the district reflect styles of many periods and that the design of new additions shall not attempt to replicate or mimic any style of the past era. The proposed 3-story addition is not visible from Springer Market Square and is only minimally visible from the municipal parking lot at the northwest of Brock and Ontario streets. Accordingly, the impact of this new construction on the cultural heritage value and character of the district is negligible. Nonetheless, its design does not mimic or replicate past styles, and it is simple and contemporary in its character. Put simply, it does not aspire to draw attention to itself and does not compete with the architectural style of surrounding buildings. Given its location, this is a fair and reasonable approach to its architectural design, and it is possible and likely that it may be entirely obscured in the future should the municipal parking lot be redeveloped. The proposed 3-story addition is located to the rear, and it will start several inches below the original roof peak. The addition will have a flat roof and accordingly will conserve the existing height of the original building and will not exceed the height of either adjacent buildings. Next slide, please. The proposed external material for the rear addition is painted fiber cement board in a medium to dark gray color. The district plan states that the materials of exterior features of a new building within the district shall be physically and visually compatible with and of comparable quality to the heritage attributes and materials of the surrounding historic buildings. So painted fiber cement board does closely resemble painted wood siding, will therefore have a traditional appearance that is physically and visually compatible with the adjacent stonework. Equally, it will be of a contrasting texture, which will also help to ensure a differentiation between the original building and new addition. A matte gray metal siding is proposed for the new infill section of wall at the second and third floor levels. This will be set back as well, but will be visible at certain points from Springer Market Square. The intention here is to minimize its presence and help it to blend in with the background. So arguably the matte gray siding will hopefully achieve this goal. Next slide, please. So given the location of the addition at the rear and within the interior of a densely developed downtown block, there are few locations for new window openings. Additionally, the noise study, which was required as part of the planning applications for this site, have led to the creation of an interior courtyard with windows facing off of it. So there will be no new windows on the building, and which complies with the district plans policy that new windows and door openings shall be located on the sides of the building, not visible from Market Square. Next slide, please. We're almost wrapping up here. So in summary, the proposed restoration of the facade in the new rear addition presents a significant rehabilitation project. Rehabilitation is designed as defined by this standards and guidelines is the sensitive adaptation of an historic place or individual component for continuing or compatible use while protecting its heritage value. Significantly, the ongoing and improved use of this building will help to ensure its long-term conservation. And moreover, the proposal supports all 4 objectives set out in Section 3 of the district plan and conserves and enhances the cultural heritage value and attributes of the district. So this went through a technical review. It was noted through planning that it had to go through a minor variance process, which did receive unanimous approval at the September 20th Committee of Adjustment meeting. Additionally, a site plan control application is submitted and currently in technical review. So responding Heritage Kingston members provided that they had no major concerns and were generally satisfied with the details provided and supportive of this project. 2 members noted the importance of the rear flat roof addition stepping down from the peak of the original gable. And additionally, there was some consensus that matte colored metal siding, stucco, or painted fiber cement board would be an appropriate cladding material for the rear addition. 1 member also expressed the importance of implementing the like-for-like replacements. The last comment was regarding the existing infill wall, but that noting that they didn't have details of what was going to be going on there, but that perhaps stucco would be a good option. So I will finish up there with the next slide, which is the recommendation, which includes both the recommendation regarding the demolition as well as the alteration. And then there are 2 more slides, I believe, with quite a number of conditions associated with this motion. Thank you so much.
And sorry, can we just go back to that last slide, please? I believe in condition 9, that second line should read 33, not 433 Brock Street.
Correct.
So we can assume that that correction has been made. It's corrected in 8, so it's not a misleading comment. I don't know you. Good. Thank you very much, Alex. Members, can you confirm that your dash comments have been correctly recorded? Nobody objecting. Okay, thank you. Members of the public who wish to speak.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to jump in briefly here and just say, for the benefit of those who are joining us today, if you wish to speak, if you could raise your hand in Zoom. Again, that's located in the center of your screen. When you move your mouse across the Zoom window, or if you're joining us as a participant, you may need to open the list of participants to the right-hand side of your screen, and there should be a raise hand button at the bottom of that list. We'll just give a couple seconds, Mr. Chair, to make sure that they've found.
I would just add that Jillian Wilson, who's the architect for this project, is on the call if Heritage Kingston members have questions that need to be directed to her.
Yeah, and I presume, Jillian, you don't wish to speak at present, since I'm not seeing any movement on your... Okay. Committee members, questions? Donald Taylor, Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of pieces I wanted to raise. Some maybe questions. There's a lot of attention in the report to this pegged peak roof construction, and the heritage impact statement said dropping down feet on the back side, and now it's inches. And I just had question about how, if we're going to the level of documenting it and it is something that we want to preserve, I just wondered how insulation was going to work. With a flat roof, you know, is the insulation done on the exterior or is it on the interior? And a lot of people are moving to spray foam insulation as being superior, but I just wondered whether anything would be obscured or hidden, or how the building science, moisture, those types of things would work with that pegged peak construction on the inside, or whether or not it matters. So I don't know if that's a question, but I just thought I would maybe throw that to staff as a consideration of whether you want to conclude that or not.
No, thank you either Alex or Gillian.
I would start by saying, it's certainly an interesting question. I don't have the answer about the insulation on the flat roof. But certainly, I think the importance there is that you're speaking to, it's an interior attribute, which we aren't technically able to, I guess, control. But I would say that given that it is a very old roof, and Andre's pointed to that, and there's obviously been a concerted effort to maintain that original peak and where it's pegged. Certainly, it's in the interest of the architect and the owner to properly, address the building science there so that you don't get, future rot and decay of it. We can defer to Jillian to see if she has any more details to share, but that's all I can offer right now.
Yeah, no, not.
I believe at this point, I have John Guerra from the contractor with me, and I believe at this point we're planning to insulate above the roof, but the height was chosen due to code restraints. We had to keep the roof a little higher to get the minimum headroom requirement. So that's what bumped it up a bit.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that solved, Don?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I kind of wondered or assumed it would be exterior. I just have two more small points. One has to do with the mechanicals on the roof. There are two places that I wondered about that now that it's going to be a flat roof and it's only stepped down by inches. One is from street level, let's say reasonably across the street, looking up, the slope of the roof would hide it, meaning that the mechanicals would be far enough back, the HVAC, that it wouldn't interrupt that ridge line against the sky, is the assumption. Then, of course, the other secondary consideration, a reasonable level from Market Square where you're looking at it and you can still see that skyline without it being interrupted between the dormers or anything by the HVAC, or maybe even strategic locations so that the dormers may obscure it. I'd wondered about the adverse impacts of noise now that they're going to be up on a flat roof with the neighbors. It's sort of out of the scope of heritage, but in the same vein with the mechanicals. And then my final question had to do with the fill-in connection, just to try and visualize it. So you have this fill-in piece, it has an opening at the bottom and a fill-in piece between the two buildings. And then presumably that's some kind of very shallow sort of walkway. And then there's going to be a vertical. And then the top of that vertical piece that stepped back is also going to be several inches below the ridge line and below the two fire protection masonry pieces. Is that correct?
Correct. So I'll start with that question because it took me a while to understand this as well, this infill piece. So you're right. So it's set, so the infill piece, this new, because there's the existing one at ground level and second floor, the very front of the building. The one they're proposing is basically, if you can imagine, set back at the second floor, and it's forming the wall that will stretch up to the flat roof, essentially at the same height and at that corner. Does that make sense? That was the best way to understand it. It's really there so that they can squeeze a little bit more of that gap in between as part of the living space and circulation space for the apartment on the second and third floor. Okay. But it will be, I think it will be visible in places from Market Square, certainly, depending on where you stand, which is why we do need to consider the appearance of it, the cladding.
And on your comment about noise is well made, because some members of this committee will remember that when the city built the little building to look after the Zamboni, all the restaurants complained about the noise that the Zamboni and the equipment in there would make. So noise is a consideration in this area for sure. Other questions from committee members? And seeing none then, any final comments from you? Otherwise, if we could put the motion back up on the screen. It's a 9-point motion. And 13 conditions. Thank you very much. That's lead with the motion, yeah. And we have not changed it at all except for the typing correction. So I'm looking for a mover. And I don't have everybody. Oh, there we go. Thank you. It's the move by Don Taylor and the seconder by Jane McFarlane. Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion as printed. Don Taylor.
this is just a minor comment. I noticed that the window surrounds are to be gunmetal gray. I'm a little disappointed in that. I think a brighter heritage color would be more attractive. And given that this is a restaurant, we want to catch the eye of the public. So I think it's just up to the applicants and staff whether they want to consider other colors. But I'd be willing to. Thank you.
Okay, so the concern about the window color there. Further comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll then ask you to vote for the motion, which is unchanged from the printing. Those in favor, raise their hands, please. There are 8 hands raised and 1 phone call to wait. Madam Councillor, have you got an answer from Janine?
Mr. Chair, yes, Ms. O'Reilly did vote in favor.
That is 9 votes in favor then. Thank you very much, Alex, for presenting that. Thank you, committee. It's a interesting one there. Okay, we move across the river to Green Bay Road and move across to Phil. And we are now, of course, permanently in part 5. So Phil, you'd like to introduce 214 Green Bay Road.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to be presenting on 214 Green Bay Road, which is a Part 5 designated property under the Ontario Heritage Act. And this is an application for alteration under Section 42. Next slide, please. In the top 2 images, they show the lot area and the neighborhood context. Yes? My apologies.
Sorry, yes, Jennifer. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't realize this project was going to keep on the agenda. I'm going to claim a conflict of interest on it. So
okay, thank you. Which my understanding is that you turn your video off and we will come back to you when we have finished.
Okay. Awesome.
Right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so Jennifer is having a conflict of interest on this one and will take no part in the discussion at all. Sorry, Phil. Okay, let's try again.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just had to take a little sip of water. So in the 2 images, top 2 images here, it shows the lot area and neighborhood context. The bottom right image shows the surrounding area and its proximity to Highway 2. And the bottom left image is a picture of building orientation from the in-process site plan. Importantly, the front of the building is facing west and will have a larger setback than many of the buildings along Green Bay Road. Next slide, please. The subject property is currently vacant of buildings and is the only property with such a lot and corresponding building configuration, meaning facing west, along Green Bay Road. Next slide, please. The subject property was included in the Village of Berryfield's Heritage Conservation District, created pursuant to Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1981 and further amended in 2016. Neither the 1992 Historic Building Inventory nor the updated inventory include this property, as the lands were vacant of buildings at the time of the HCD plan's creation. Section 2 of the HCD plan outlines the cultural heritage value of the district and includes a list of heritage attributes that are essential to defining and conserving this value. This includes a list of the village's rural village character, which is defined by small lots, minimal setbacks of most buildings from the street, built form of primarily single detached dwellings of consistent scale and massing, ranging from 1 to 2 stories in height, with distinctive architectural features such as pitched gabled roofs, with distinct wood siding, prominent front doors, simple rectangular window and door openings, and the presence or absence of porches. Next slide, please. So this is a list that was also in the report as well, listing the extensive recent history on this application, and its past approvals, its past planning applications, its current site plan control application, and the application that is seeking to be amended through this application currently. These previous approvals were deemed to be compatible with the district, and the subject application building and garage plans largely have a similar design. The following presentation will focus on the aspects changing from the previous heritage approval, namely P18-071-2019, after briefly summarizing the aspects that will remain the same from this application. The goal of this application is to refine these changing attributes, not to revisit the existing and effect approvals granted by council in their entirety. This includes the existing approval that already permits the erection of a new principal dwelling and associated garage with similar massing and heights and building on vacant lands. Exhibits B through D of the report show the aspects that are being changed with this approval for further reference. Next slide, please. There are many critical aspects of this application that are not changing from the previous approval passed by council. The following principal building aspects have remained consistent, including the proportion and massing minus the deck, the height, setback, roof form, roof material and style, orientation, materials minus the roof shingles, colors, fencing, trees, and porch materials. I misspoke earlier. I just wanted to mention the porching and massing for that first bullet point at the top. And then the second one here being the following detached garage aspects have remained consistent, being detached, remaining behind the front principal building wall, being in the same location, and having the same materials minus shingles. Next slide, please. So moving along the main building aspects that will be changing. Along the west and east facades, the following differs from the previous applications. Such as the addition of the stairs to both sides of the wraparound porch and the rear building steps associated with the enclave at the back. I will discuss the porch in just a moment. Regarding the enclave stairs, the addition of new rear steps is appropriate as they are only 3 steps in height, are located at the rear of the property where it is clear it is not part of the main entrance, and are similar in scale to those on the surrounding properties. Regarding the porch size and new porch steps, the HCD plan notes that entrances are an important feature of the public facade of buildings in Berryfield, which is frequently highlighted with porches that are either, quote, recessed or projected from the wall face for emphasis, end quote. Further, according to 4.5.2G of the HCD plan, new buildings are to have an obvious principal entrance that forms a prominent part of the street-facing facade. The HCD plan also notes the connection of porches and their ability to emphasize the principal building entrance. In the area, numerous buildings along Green Bay Road are close to the front property line and have associated porches that are even closer to the front property line. Importantly, the HCD plan places no limit on the size of porches. So in addition to the 2 stairs and the 8-foot porch, I believe they fulfill the HCD plan for the following reasons. The property has a unique orientation compared to those buildings along Green Bay Road, as it is the only building with a front facade facing west in this immediate area. Thus, increased legibility of the front entrance of the property by way of having a more prominent deck with associated stairs facing north and south highlight this unique westerly facing entrance, and that emphasize the fact that the entrance is in fact on the west and not north or south. In addition, having a deep porch emphasizes or increases the feeling, quote unquote, that the building is closer to the street edge, which would better align with the other Green Bay properties in this area, which are already closer to the street edge themselves. As there is no porch size limit in the HCD plan, the porch is wooden. The additional stairs and 8-foot depth can contribute to the rural character of minimal setbacks and could increase the legibility of the front entrance of the property by being, quote, a projection from the wall face for emphasis, end quote. These changes fulfill the intent of the plan. One moment, please. I did want to mention one other, if you would remain on that other slide, please. I did want to mention one other part. So when I was reviewing, after extensive discussions in recent days regarding this application, I wanted to do a fulsome report of the approved documents of this application and previous applications. After reviewing the committee recommended documents and drawings listed on the city's website and the related Heritage Kingston minutes from that application, as well as the approved council documents, it appears that the 8-foot deck was the size that was originally approved by council, despite the applicant noting in the 2019 HK meeting his intention to reduce this to 6 feet. In this case, it appears that the 8-foot porch originally approved is in fact the current in effect depth, as that was the depth approved by council. Next slide, please. Staying on the changes to the principal building, along the north and south elevations, minor changes to the window placement, amount, and sizing are proposed. Along the north elevation, the newly proposed window has a proportion of 1 by 1.5. And the window placement also differs slightly from the previous approval. Along the south elevation, one window is shrunk to a proportion of approximately 1 by 1.25. Both window changes reflect the rectangular dimensions present in the district. The change of roof material from steel to asphalt is noted in the HCD plan as an appropriate roofing material for new construction. Thus, it conforms with the HCD plan. Next slide, please. Moving on to the detached garage. The south and north elevations are mostly consistent with the previous plans except for the increased dormer massing, stair orientation clarifications, addition of the new door along the north elevation, and removal of the windows along the bottom of the north elevation. Excuse me. The new stair orientation is appropriate as it meets the intent of the HCD plan, namely that the stairs are at the rear of the property and remain roughly the same massing as before. The HCD plan does not provide explicit direction regarding the design of doors for garages or their placement, except that garages should be located at the rear of the lot, not form part of the street facade, and are accessed via a driveway, all of which the garage achieves. For reference, I am referring to the top right drawing with that little door on the side that would be facing the north elevation. Finally, the massing of the roof, the garage roof requires further assessment as it is being changed. The design of the dormer itself was, quote, deemed to be a gable roof dormer by the applicant's qualified professional. As the terms dormer and gabled roof are not defined in the Village of Berryfield plan or the in effect zoning bylaw for this area, these items listed in condition 10 in the previous scope of work appear to be left open to interpretation. A review of the proposed design versus the term gable roof dormer appears to confirm that this type of design is considered by some professionals to be a form of a gable roof dormer. When originally reviewing this design, staff consulted the Ontario Architecture website and reviewed examples of dormers. Two of these examples of dormers appear to either break up the eave line or drop below the cornice. Both are not dissimilar from the subject application. Nonetheless, staff reviewed how the increased massing might impact the public realm. A review found the grade differences in this area of the district maintain the prominence of the nearby 1.5 to 2-story main building along the corner of James Street and Green Bay Road. In addition, the presence of select trees in the subject property and at 218 Green Bay Road would mitigate some of the impact of this increased massing on Green Bay Road when looking northwest at the subject property. You can see Exhibit F for site pictures that demonstrate these tree areas and their crown for reference. The garage should mostly be hidden from view when viewing the property directly south by having the main property in front of that building. Importantly, the increased width of the dormer has the effect of reducing the pitch of the roof, bringing it closer to the low to medium pitch of gabled roofs already present in the district, which is a medium pitch is noted in the rural village district character attributes in section 2. Finally, as the previous dormer was already visible from the public, and by way of approval was deemed to not adversely affect the heritage attributes of the district, this alternative wider dormer with the same height as the previous garage appears to fulfill condition 10 in the previous scope of work. Next slide, please. Staying on the detached garage, the major changes along the west and east elevation, not already discussed, include changes to the window design of the garage door itself, the removal of a window, and the change of shingle material from steel to asphalt. As previously noted in the HCD plan, this does not provide explicit direction regarding the design for doors or garages and ancillary structures. However, the HCD plan does note the garage is to have contemporary material to that of the principal structure, which this garage also achieves with its wood siding and its asphalt shingle roof and square windows. This is achieved by having the same siding and newly proposed shingles as mentioned previously. Next slide, please. So this is our recommendation here, which lists all the changes that are happening to the proposal, but I did want to draw your attention to clause 3E. This is related to my earlier comment about the porch size being my apologies, the approved deck size of being 8 feet instead of 6 feet. Staff, meaning myself, was under the impression that 6 feet was the one approved previously, and I wrote this recommendation accordingly. However, the approved drawings show 8 feet as what the applicant is requesting, and this by no means is meant to interpret the applicant to have a 10-foot porch instead of a 8-foot porch. I wanted to draw that to your attention as committee members. Next slide, please. The following is our recommendation here for the list of alterations that would be subject for this application here. So these are also the same ones in your report as well. And next slide, please. And at this point, I just wanted to say that as this is a Part 5 designation, I'm prepared to take your questions regarding the commentary on or addition to your comments provided on Dash. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to fielding your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil. First of all, we go to members of the public who may wish to speak. If they could put their hands up, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands. However, we do need to confirm the comments from Dash as well, please.
Oh, I thought I asked for those before, sorry. Members, have you any concerns with the way your comments on Dash have been reproduced in the agenda? No, everybody's happy. Thank you very much. So members of the public, if you wish to speak, if you can raise your hand. And I am not seeing any at all.
I'm not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair.
Okay, committee members then. John Taylor.
Yes, thank you. I recognize, Philip, that you weren't involved in this application previously, so you're at a bit of a disadvantage. And more so since you pointed out what appears to be a mistake last time when during the committee meeting, it was made clear to the committee that the application was for a 6-foot porch. And then it turns out really to be an 8-foot porch. So that's really, I have to say, a mistake by staff, a very unfortunate mistake. And personally, I think the committee should should realize that what they thought they were getting was a 6-foot porch. Anyway, I have questions. You point out the justification for the 8-foot porch as being the fact that the HCD plan doesn't put a limit on porch width. My impression is the HCD plan doesn't have any numbers in it, or practically no numbers. It doesn't put limits on things like windows or porches. And your argument would therefore suggest that if the plan doesn't place a limit, then anything goes. Is that really what you believe?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My intention was not to mention that. My intention was not to convey that without a number, we are willing to approve any number. My intention is to note that the plan is specific, but it's not specific, in that when the applicant has requested in this case and was firm in their suggestion that they wanted 8 feet, staff members such as myself did not have a number to point to say, I'm sorry, the HCD plan does not permit that request and we would not be able to support it. That's where I'm fitting here. But I also wanted to mention that my argument extended further than that and also was couched in the idea of increasing the prominence of the door entrance to the main property, which the HCD plan does put a lot of value in because of the unique orientation of the building on the lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll comment on that later if I have the opportunity, but it appears to me that the site plan shows that the proposed porch does not respect the setback from the property line. Is that true?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That was not something that was reviewed in this application, as that would be dealt with at the site plan stage. This is purely looking at the heritage attributes of the property, not the setback requirements. Thank you.
a little puzzled. Certainly, well, all right, I'll leave that for now. Okay, a somewhat more general question is that given that committee comments on Dash and previous committee discussion are clearly in favor of a 6-foot porch, why are staff basically ignoring that those sets of opinions?
It appears that Jen has her hand up. I'm going to be deferring to her.
Thanks, and through you. I just wanted to point out certainly that staff are never ignoring the suggestions of committee when seeking input through Dash comments. It's an opportunity for staff to consider the input of the committee, and we value it quite heavily. But the opportunity here for staff is to also assess the proposed works against the criteria that are established both in the HCD plan as well as the guidelines and the standards appropriate to heritage development and other applicable policies and legislation within the city and the province. So it is not an opportunity for staff to ignore or set aside recommendations of the committee. And I think that you'll see in the staff report, staff make efforts to address why it is that their position differs from the position that may be recommended by committee in this instance. So I just want to note that I think it is never the intention of staff to set aside the recommendations of committee. This is not an oppositional position. We are in a cumulative building process, and taking those conditions in, we assess them from a professional judgment standpoint. Thank you.
You done?
I also have a question about the dormers on the garage. I find it extraordinary that you're asking the applicants to say whether their design is a dormer or not. You mentioned, well, I looked up the definition of a dormer in several places, including the Ontario architecture page. And that page says that a dormer is a gable end window that pierces through the sloping roof. In other words, it is not part of the wall. And I'm concerned that you're not dealing here with the dormer at all, and that the well, I should also point out that the city has a dormer bylaw that it refers to in several places, not applicable here, I admit, but it describes what a dormer, what an allowable dormer is, and that it does not include a window that is part of a wall. So my position is that what is being proposed is not a dormer, and I'll comment further on that later.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just wanted to respond to that as it was I who reviewed the application when it first came in regarding the dormer aspect. So the condition in the previous approval was to change the shed dormer, which was originally submitted, to a gable dormer, and that was actually built into the condition of approval. So that was a formal requirement. So when they submitted their application with the plans before you, the applicant's architect says this is a dormer. And we as staff had no way of contravening that. The condition says you have to build this gable dormer, and we reviewed it with that in mind, with the applicant saying it's a dormer. We did a little homework and found that it meets various definitions of dormers. Some pierce the roof in the middle, some pierce the roof at the edge of the wall length. But for all intents and purposes, it's a dormer, and staff had no way of countering that. So agree with it or don't agree with it, it meets the intent of the approval that was given. And the application before us today, I believe, is just to alter the shape of it slightly. And I'll let Phil explain that further if committee has questions. But that's just a little background on where we are today with the dormer question.
Okay, thank you. Jane, I've noticed you're in the lineup, but Philip, do you have a comment on dormers first?
I do, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind bringing up slide number 9, please. I just wanted to show the old versus the current approval again. One lower, please. Oh. It should be under number 9. My apologies. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Perfect. So based on the idea of piercing through the wall, Mr. Taylor, I wanted to show that the bottom application and its designs were the ones that were supported by HK and were the ones approved by council ultimately. And if you look at the difference of the two, it's changing the slope, which does increase the massing slightly, but it is again not a projection from the wall. It is not a piercing of the roof. So the previous one and the current one have the same type of form regarding roof piercing ability or inability. So I do not believe that. So in that case, I believe that this is more consistent and is still consistent with that approval. And if you go down, Elizabeth, again to number 14, please. It should be right after the question slide there, Elizabeth. Thank you. So this is the website from the Ontario Architecture that shows the dormers here. And I wanted to draw your attention from to the left and the right image. The left image showing that, oh, my apologies here. The left image showing that the breaks up the eave line in this case, and the right picture showing that it drops below the cornice, which are both not dissimilar from the current application. With that in mind, I wanted to just draw the attention of that to committee members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Jane, I think you were next in line.
Yes, thank you. I have to say I'm disappointed that the 6-foot depth that was discussed at HK in December of 2019 and approved wasn't communicated to council. And I would like to ask how this can be avoided in future, because clearly an extra 2 feet in a covered porch does increase the massing of this building and the appearance of this building.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to get into a lot of back and forth here, but the only thing I would add to this is in the future, the best way to get these in front of everybody in an early time is to get it into writing into your dash comments. If we get it in advance in the dash comments, it can be built into the report and into our recommendations and motions. And in that case, carried forward, even in a Part 5 application, the comment to the committee can be directly carried forward. Otherwise, for a Part 5 application, you are welcome to include final comments, which are added into the report and provided to council for consideration. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And just before you, Councillor Doherty, I would note that only a minority of the committee is using -4 comments, and would recommend that you do use it more, especially with the Part 5s. Councillor Doherty, you had a hand, I believe.
Oh, sorry, I didn't finish.
Oh, sorry, Jane.
I had another question, actually. Okay, great. So I want to ask Philip if he would agree, and I believe he said this, that the increased size of the dormer, or whatever we call it, does increase the massing of the garage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I would also like to point out that dormers shall be located away from public view. That is 4.5.2D. And that, let's see. A key consideration is that outbuildings are subordinate to the main structure. And I guess you could say that this is subordinate, but it is very large and the massing is very obvious from Green Bay Road. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to talk about the garage as well, particularly the drawings on the north-south elevation. I wonder if we could look at that again. Just have some questions about the size of the windows. Could staff just put that drawing back up, please? Okay, keep going. It's the north-south, it's the garage. North-south facing. That's the principal building. Here we go. First of all, the south elevation, like the drawings of the windows, the bottom windows, they are not circled. Therefore, I'm assuming that the sizing doesn't change, but certainly on the drawings, the size looks a lot smaller than the previous plan. Just wonder if staff could speak to that.
They do appear, oh, my apologies. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I wanted to mention that in this case, because the other windows were not discussed in terms of their size and dimensions, except the drawing provided, I can't really address that question because I don't know the previous dimensions. But I do agree with you that it appears that the size looks different. Thank you.
And it's now the dormers are broader and the windows don't look like the right size either. So I have a bit of concern there with all of the windows on both of those alterations of the garage. They don't seem to fit, much too small.
May I respond?
Thank you. Yes, Phil.
Through you, Mr. Chair. With that in mind, again, at least for the top windows, the ones that are part of the dormer, they do appear relatively consistent with the past approval that was supported by Heritage Kingston and approved by council. Thank you.
Okay, thank
but
you.
again, the size of the dormer changed, and therefore, it certainly looking at the drawings, it doesn't seem to match as well. I think, and the dormers end up larger. The window needs to be also extended for balance.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, I was just speaking about the windows. My apologies for not being specific in that regard there, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I had a couple questions, or actually, I guess it's one question, a comment, and a question to do with the trees. I'm always a little bit concerned in planning when trees are mentioned as a mitigating device because they're not really enforceable, and that plays out many, many times. But in respect to a Part 5 district, and I recognize I'm far more familiar with the old Sydenham Heritage District. But in this district and looking through the plan, I don't see a lot of protections related to trees. But I'm wondering, when you go to the level that you have in Exhibit F to indicate that they're going to mitigate impacts, and then you also mention it in the language of the report on page 109 or page 10 of 14. I'm just wondering, the public facing message on that this is a mitigating tree, is that defendable, and or does Part 5 capture that as a quality? Because without the trees, you are dealing with, from one view, a very, very significant mass of building, and possibly also the building next door. And you've offered this as, like the district plan says, as something that may soften, not in front of the structure itself, but might soften that. So I'm just wondering if staff could speak to that and whether or not that can be something that's defendable going forward.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. In this case, one of the character attributes in the village of Berryfield is the landscaping elements, including trees. In this case, both of the trees that I do mention in my report are on private property, and I do understand what you're saying regarding their potential to be maybe not there, or when they're not in season or such. But it is one of those elements that when the tree crown is in effect, it will have a noticeable reduction of view from looking at dormers. And I did also want to mention that the building itself, when looking from the north-south, which is where most of the buildings themselves have a north-south facing view on that road, the building will mostly cover the garage in its entirety. But that tree was mentioned specifically when you're looking at that direct view southwest. And so I thought that was an important consideration to note as well when people are walking and traveling, of course, on Green Bay Road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Done. That's solved. Okay, thank you. Other questions, other comments? Final comments then from the committee? Don Taylor.
Sorry, I'm not sure I remember the procedures. Has this motion been put on the floor?
No.
Should I wait until after it's put on the floor for final comments?
You can, yes, if you want to.
Well, no, I'm leaving it with you. I think we've passed questions, and I think I'd like to make a comment, and I think I'd rather prefer to wait until the motion's on the floor, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. Last call then for comments before I look for a mover and a seconder. And seeing none then, looking for a mover and a seconder for this motion as printed. We haven't changed it at all. It can't be changed, in fact. Moved by Councillor Oosterhoff, second by Councillor Doherty. Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion. Don Taylor.
Yes, I think this is a well, obviously controversial application and problematical in a number of ways. We have a recommendation for a porch 8 feet wide, and the justification is that the plan doesn't put a limit on porches. But what the plan really does supposed to do is provide guidelines and rather than specifications. And the overriding guideline of the district plan is for simplicity, for simple roofs, for modest scaling and massing and so on. So in the case of the porch, an 8-foot porch is really a huge part of this property. It'll be very prominent in the public view. It's a wraparound porch. I haven't seen anything like that in the district. I think when the committee discussed this previously, I think we thought we were being quite generous in permitting a wraparound 6-foot porch, and certainly that's still what I prefer. Anyway, the other problem is the garage dormers, and my understanding that the previous approval was that the proposed shed dormers would have to become gable dormers. And instead, we have something very different. Instead of gable dormers, we have walls with a window in gable. And I completely disagree with what staff has said about the definition of dormer. You can look in any, well, many dictionaries, but and you can look again at those pictures from the Ontario Architecture website. None of those examples, in none of those examples is the window part of the wall. It penetrates the roof, the sloping roof. And that's what the definition means, and that's what it says. So I think this kind of roof is totally inconsistent with the district plan. The plan says that they prefer simple gable roofs, and dormers are acceptable if they're not too visible, but these are huge dormers that are highly visible particularly when from the street, and they really open up a completely different interpretation of what a dormer is and what is acceptable in the Berryfield plan. I mean, I think it's up to this committee to support the Berryfield district plan and support the members of the villagers who live there and who care about the village. So I think we, as a committee, we should defeat the recommendation, send it back, and let it come back with real dormers, and then we'll review it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others wishing to speak? The motion having been moved and seconded. Jennifer, I'm not sure that you can enter at this point. Other committee members? Don Mitchell?
I guess part of the difficulty for me is I wasn't on the committee when this first approval went through, but in reading this report, my sense was we're speaking to smaller changes to a prior approval. And I certainly respect immensely longstanding committee members' perspectives on this, but I looked at this just to share some of my thought. I looked at this from the lens of that new infill in the district does not have to be a heritage structure per se. It has to be sensitive to the heritage plan. And when I look at my own interpretation of that, for example, with the porch and the 2 feet, I have to really seriously consider that a kitchen chair is 3 feet. My knees off it and feet to the floor is 4 feet. If I walk comfortably through any area, my shoulder width, and I'm not a large man, is 3 feet, almost just shy of 3 feet. And if I've got anything else, flowers or anything else on the front of that deck, I'm at 8 feet. Most of my neighbors on my street, which is not a heritage area, there are 3 that have recently put in front porches, and all of them are 7 to 8 feet. And so when I looked at it from the lens of the district plan talking about fronting very close to the roadways and other language, and I looked at the practicality of the 8 feet, I saw it as less of a concern. But I share some of the concern about the dormer and the unusual roof of the other building. I accept the mitigation, but if the mitigation can't be enforced, if it's just a pleasant thing that's there now, I do have concerns with the garage, the location of it, and the roof, the unusual roof configuration. Anyway, just to share my perspective on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate Donald's comments there. It was almost, he says it better than I do. I think that I think it's with the porch. I think that there's an enjoyment of living concept as well. I think that it's a reasonable ask to go, and I think it suits the overall mass of the property to have an 8-foot deck like that. So. I don't have necessarily as much of a problem with the dormers and the garage. I think that this is still a very sensitive project to the heritage plan, and I still think it falls for me within a reasonable ask, and will be very, very complimentary to the community. Unless, have we heard negative comments from the community? Have I missed something there?
I haven't seen any.
No.
They would be in this package, or you would have heard them today.
Yeah, so I think I can, like I said, support it, and it's going to be an admirable, spectacular property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Thank you. Just want to comment that I think the effect of these buildings on Berryfield and with regards to the Heritage Conservation District, it's the sum of the parts. So now we have an extra 2 feet on the front of the building, more massing, and we also have a garage that the street view from Green Bay Road has more massing as well. As far as the trees mitigating, those trees I think are probably deciduous, so it's only going to mitigate when they actually have foliage on them. So I think that's another point to be made. The other thing I'd like to say is I always put my comments on Dash, and the discussion of the 6-foot change that came up at Heritage Kingston, so it couldn't have been actually anticipated on Dash or commented on prior to that. And I do believe one member did put something about 6 feet on Dash prior to the 2019 meeting. And that's everything. I won't be supporting this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Others wishing to speak? And seeing, oh, sorry, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, apologies for the interruption. Just with regards to Ms. Campbell having put her hand up, she did have a point to make that was procedural in response to a comment that Mr. Taylor had made. It is within your discretion whether or not she can make that clarification for the procedure.
If it's a procedural comment, that's fine. There is no way of easily finding that out on Zoom, unfortunately. So, Dr. Campbell, your procedural comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and through you, and apologies for my interruption as well. I just wanted to be clear with committee that if there was a vote not to support the recommendation would not come back to staff for reconsideration and rewrite to come back to committee. It is a Part 5 application, and so it would go to the council for consideration. City Council makes the ultimate decision on this, but it would go as a non-supported recommendation from the Heritage Committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe I asked if there are any further comments from members. And seeing none, then I will ask you to vote. It is, of course, unamended, and you either vote to approve or not approve. Those in favour, can you please raise your hands? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't know what Janine is voting.
Mr. Chair, she is voting in favor.
In favor, that is 5. And those against, if you could raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3. And that therefore is carried 5 votes to 3. Thank you very much, Phil, for that complicated one and getting us through it. And we move on to Princess Street. And Ryan, 223 Princess Street. Oh, and I have to invite Jennifer back as well. Jennifer, welcome. Thank you. Okay, Ryan, it's all yours.
Mr. Chair, just waiting for my presentation. So this is the property is 223 Princess Street. The subject property is on the north side of Princess, sort of a mid-block between Sydenham and Market Street. Can I have the next slide, please? So here's the property. You can see it spans the full width of the block from Princess to Queen and it's sort of mid-block. Next slide, please. The property contains the former movie theater known as the Capitol Theater, which opened its doors in 1920 and closed to move to Dalton Avenue in 2012. The property is recently received Planning Act approval to construct a 9-story residential tower on the property with frontage on both Princess and Queen Street. Next slide, please. And as a condition of the Planning Act approval, the owners entered into an heritage easement agreement under Part 4 of the Heritage Act with the City of Kingston to ensure the retention and restoration of the 1920 former theater facade fronting Princess Street. Schedule B of the Heritage Easement Agreement outlines the cultural heritage value of the property, while Schedule C provides a detailed list of the heritage conservation expectations of the owner with respect to the Princess Street facade works. And I believe that is included in your agenda package. So what is before you is a portion of Schedule B, which is the cultural heritage value of the property. And I wanted to note, that the heritage attributes in the schedule include the Spanish Revival 2-story facade, the recessed entrance sheltered by the marquee, plain coarse masonry stone veneer, the shallow windows, tripartite windows on the second floor with stylized detailing, The frieze band and the floral detailing, lion's head and chain, and of course the current marquee is also noted as an attribute in the district, or in the in the heritage easement agreement. I would note on my spot that there are no interior attributes noted, so that should be understood. As well, there are no elements noted on the Queen Street elevation or the larger building, a mid-block. All heritage attributes are focused on the Princess Street elevation. So what is before you today? Next slide, please. As part of, and we'll stay on this slide for most of my presentation, this is the concept plans that the applicant has provided specifically for the front elevation. And as part of fulfilling the requirements under the agreement, this heritage permit application is being submitted. It's to review and to gain formal approval of the facade restoration plans. So some of the key changes are the securing of the facade, the removal of the existing marquee, which was built in the mid to late 20th century, and a replication of the marquee to the original 1920s design with an aluminum product. It'll be in an antique bronze color with detailing around the soffits, around the marquee. The faces of the marquee will be a translucent plexiglass panel. The planters are to be internally lit on all three sides with black building name, Crown, which is the name of the development. A traditional theater style lighting array is also proposed on the ceiling of the canopy, and the original chains are to be repaired and reinstalled above. The applicants are also proposing to reinstate the former sloped red terracotta tile pent roof with wooden cornice brackets flanked by the capstone parapet walls designed to match the 1920s plans. The second floor windows are likely replaced in the 1990s, are to be replaced with aluminum fixed windows with divided lights, also in an antique bronze color in the original glazing pattern. And that's a 24 pane central window flanked by matching 12 pane windows with clear glass. The ladder wall cladding is to be removed, and the all stone and terracotta details are to be restored. The new antique bronze colored doors with clear glazing are proposed on the ground floor and are to be recessed approximately 1.5 meters from the front face of the building. The new entrance will provide access to both the residents and the visitors of the new apartment, as well as to provide access to the new commercial uses on the ground floor. Poster box style metal frames with backlighting are proposed on either side of the new entrance to advertise new businesses within. As the subject application is required through the terms of the easement agreement, it is therefore outside of the standard heritage permit process, as this is not a Part 4 designated property, and the easement agreement does not reference a process specifically for this approval. There is no formal role for Heritage Kingston in this matter. So this report is being processed through the Director of Heritage discretion under the procedural bylaw, similar to the city's processing of Part 5 designations, Part 5 alteration applications, excuse me. I should note also that a concurrent site plan application is being processed to finalize the technical details of the new condominium development, including the design of the new 9-story tower and the Queen Street elevation. So that portion of the development, that portion of the overall development is not subject to the heritage easement agreement or this application before committee. So in terms of our review, the former Capitol Theatre on Princess Street is significant in reflecting the evolution of commercial development in downtown Kingston. It's important in maintaining the integrity of the historic streetscape. Further, it includes many representative and stylistic elements of the Spanish Revival and Mission style of architecture, and was designed by a renowned architect, a theater architect named Charles Kane. The theater is important in conserving and defining this historic former entertainment, or I guess current entertainment district portion of Princess Street. The conservation and restoration works, as I noted in Schedule B, or Schedule C, excuse me, of the easement agreement, outline specific retention, repair, and restoration works understood and agreed upon by the city and the owner. The primary objective of the agreement is to ensure the retention of the Princess Street facade and to restore and repurpose it as the primary pedestrian access to the condominium tower to the rear, which are the north, and the ground floor commercial spaces within. It is intended that the restored facade would maintain the architectural style of the former theater and the scale of the surrounding buildings. Schedule C outlines in detail the various aspects of the facade that are to be conserved or restored, including the coarse stone veneer, the shallow arch triple window openings with stylized masonry columns, reveals, frieze boards, lion busts, and the chains, and other elements, including the marquee, which I'll get to in a little bit. Standard 8 of the Parks Canada's Standards and Guidelines and Principle 3 of the Ministry's guiding principles direct the maintenance and conservation and repair rather than replacement of character-defining elements on a protected property. The proposed scope of work for the wall cladding and the decorative masonry and the metal elements is commendable and supportable from a heritage conservation perspective. The current marquee is noted as a heritage attribute in Schedule B of the Heritage Agreement. Further, its, quote, conservation and restoration, unquote, is noted in Schedule C as part of the works to be done in the agreement. It is clear upon review of the original 1920s architectural plans that the current large round marquee is not original to the building. It was added sometime in the mid to late 20th century and has become a bit of a landmark on Princess Street. The overriding purpose, as I mentioned, of the agreement is to conserve the cultural heritage value of the property and its heritage attributes, which include the marquee. The theater character and theme, however, with its ornate stone work, it's in the Spanish Revival style, is arguably of utmost importance from the cultural heritage perspective. This facade has suffered the loss of many of its original elements over the years due to deterioration, taste, and functional need, including its original marquee and pent roof. The required conservation and restoration works include the introduction of many new elements that are intended to replicate those lost original 1920s features. The sole purpose, as I mentioned, of the agreement is to ensure that the former theater character, theme, and heritage detailing are conserved as part of the larger development on this site in order to maintain that pedestrian scale and historic character of this portion of Princess Street. The availability of these 1920s Norman MacLeod plans for this building provide a clear understanding of the original intent of the building's facade. The proponents have shown a clear intent to restore this much altered facade to be as close to that original 1920s design as possible. Now, this includes also replicating the pitch and the height of the original roof, the depth and the design of the cornice and brackets, and the profile and scale of the parapet walls, all based on the original 1920s plans. The reintroduction of the lost clay tile roof and parapet walls will highlight the accompanying restoration of the terracotta floral designing or detailing and reinforce that Spanish Revival style. So similarly, the new marquee will be designed based on those 1920s plans and the 1930 era's photographs that are in the file, as close as possible. I mean, the design, the detailing, the scale of the original marquee are all based on those plans. The new marquee will have the added benefit of not only being designed to reflect those intent of the architect and builder, but will also be substantially smaller than the current marquee, and thus allow improved views of that decorative features and detailing of the wall above. So given that the current marquee both currently obscures and overpowers the heritage attributes of this facade and does not complement the character of the building, and given that the new marquee and the new pent roof will be designed to allow to follow the original Spanish Revival design intents of the building, staff supported its removal and their installation of the new version. So as noted above, the ground floor of the subject elevation has been substantially altered over time. The applicants are proposing to remove all the ceramic tile, aluminum doors, and poster boxes. The intent is to restore the existing walling to match the masonry veneer of the second story. Staff have included a condition of approval requiring the owner to submit a report outlining the conditions of the cladding and revised plans showing the appropriate cladding alternatives for the approval of the Director of Heritage Services. And appropriate cladding options could include such things as masonry material in a complementary tone. The current doors and windows on this elevation are not original, of course. The applicants are proposing to replace the second story windows with fixed anodized aluminum windows in that antique bronze color with divided lights in a pattern that matches the original plans. The main doors will also be aluminum in a matching bronze tone and will be reoriented to include 2 double doors with clear glazing above and a central opaque spandrel panel. In order to advertise the proposed ground floor commercial uses within, the applicants are also proposing to install the new theater style box-lit poster frames flanking the entrance. Provincial Guideline 7 and Federal Standard number 11 notes the new addition should be complementary to the heritage building in terms of scale, form, and materials, but distinguishable from the heritage building and not designed to replicate the existing style. So the proposed changes to the doors, windows, and poster boxes will have a positive impact on the overall facade and will further the goal of conserving its cultural heritage value, while also creating a functional and attractive entrance for the new condominium. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal will uphold the heritage conservation objectives set out in Schedule C of the agreement and those in the official plan, the ministry's guiding principles and the standards and guidelines of Parks Canada. The restored theater elevation will conserve its landmark status and the cultural heritage value of the property and its contribution on the historic streetscape of Princess Street. In terms of our circulation, we received building comments, which noted building permit is required. Engineering noted that an encroachment permit is required. And the committee comments are included in your agenda package, Mr. Chair, the ones we received. And they were largely in support of the proposal. And therefore, our recommendation is to support this application. Next slide, please. There's a recommendation outlining the changes, and the next slide is a series of conditions associated with our recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Members of the committee, can you confirm your dash comments were correctly recorded? Don, you're saying yes. Okay, excellent, excellent. Nobody wants to speak on that one. Members of the public who may wish to speak on this, you could raise your hands, or
I believe a couple representatives of the owners are in attendance. I don't know if they're
okay. Thank you very much.
Speaking, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I do have a hand raised by Shirley Bailey to speak on this.
Okay, Shirley. Oh, there you go, Shirley.
Good morning, committee. Committee members, and thank you, Ryan, for that presentation. As everyone will know, this has been a very long and controversial application. And my understanding is the site plan matter is still actually before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. The foundation is very pleased with what has been proposed by the proponent here. We have not seen these drawings. So this is very interesting, and we completely support it, and very glad that the original drawings are available so that the proponent can replicate those. So we've had some conversations with city staff concerning the structural plans, which of course, if you don't have the structure, if the structure itself behind the facade is not secure, it's going to be challenging to protect the facade. So we are, and this is before building department at this point, so certainly not the purview of Heritage Kingston, but it is a complicated and it's a complicated project to maintain this facade. And we give a lot of credit to the developer for his proposal to do so. So thank you. I am interested to hear what the other committee members have to say about the drawings that are before them today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shirley. Other members of the public? And I'm not seeing, Mike Keane.
Sorry, I'm just getting set up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a land use planner with Photon Consultants, and I've been assisting with this project, and we're appreciative of all the help that staff have given advancing the application to this point. So I'd just like to assist with some of the questions from Ms. Bailey, because it's very important that they are pleased with moving forward, as they've been an appellant of this project, and to get it to, and they've also been a major proponent now getting it to where it is today. So to assist on some of those questions, the building permit aspect of securing that wall is underway. We have a heritage engineer, John Cook, who's assisting us with those stabilization pieces to ensure that what remains of the front wall is retained, and that's in process. So just to take a step back, this permit today is very important because it actually feeds into being able to advance the site plan approval as well as demolition approval. So there's 3 or 4 steps that are all kind of running concurrently, with this heritage permit being a major step in finally advancing the site plan and finally advancing building permits. And I'll remain to assist with any questions that the committee may have as well. And I hope I've answered Ms. Bailey's questions, but if I've missed one, I'm happy to help with that as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Other members of the public, and I'm not seeing any hands. Madam Clerk, are you seeing anything I'm not seeing?
No, Mr. Chair, I do not see any further hands.
Okay, in that case, we'll go on to committee members who wish to ask questions. Oh, look at that. Very, very good. Not rushing you, but you're not going to have very long. Okay, wow, how about that? Final comments then. You do get a second round. Okay, oh, Don Mitchell, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I didn't ask these as questions, but in reading the report, there does appear sort of some discrepancies. You end up with some drawings that show the side view that show brick all the way forward. And then you look at like an historic drawing of the front and it shows that it's stone. And then having been on site, you see that around the level of the marquee, there seems to have been, and it may be the construction over the ages, but there seems to be a real disconnect from the above to what's going to be below. And now there's all this torn back brick. And so I had wondered about many aspects of this. How much is, I wrote down the quote when it was said, so let me see if I can find it, but how much is preservation of heritage, conserve heritage character and attributes, and how much is selective choice that we're sort of hand-picking what we would like to raise out or bring forward in time, and then we're sort of ignoring other aspects of that. So in that vein, I wanted to raise a few things for the sake of raising it. To me, if I'm looking up or down Princess Street, the side of the marquee is almost as valuable to me as the front from a heritage point of view, and the lettering that may or may not be on it, etc. I note that the 1920 picture actually shows a very strong vertical sign, the capital sign, and actually that is one of the things that I noticed the most. So on the one hand, we're grabbing the marquee, but we're ignoring the vertical sign. And you'll note in that photograph, there's another vertical sign of another building. And then the terracotta roof is a real interesting choice. And on a personal level, I really like it. But again, it's adding back something of a particular era. And just for me, as from my lens, again, it sort of feels like we're picking and choosing what we want to add or not add. It will obscure a little bit of the the upper part of the stonework, some of which is very detailed. So I didn't want to ask these as questions because obviously groups like the Frontenac Heritage Foundation and city staff and others are very pleased with this, but I just felt it was worth raising that there are attributes we have chosen to hold up and include and others that we haven't for some reason.
Mike Keane, do you want to comment?
I can maybe say a couple of things, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, fine.
From our perspective, and then I'll pass over to Mike. Just a quick clarification. It is a little confusing. It's actually a brick building, brick facade, a brick wall, but it's clad with a limestone detail. So that the drawings may be a little confusing in that respect. I think just to clarify, all of what you see today, minus the marquee, the original features are being restored and retained. So the walling, the details, the chain, the lion heads, all of that stuff is being retained. All of the work that has been altered over time, the windows, the big round marquee, and everything on the ground floor, which has been altered at least 3 times that we know of, is being restored or replicated to the 1920s original plans. And that includes the roof. It needs a roof. It doesn't have one. It was taken off some point in its history. But based on those initial plans, so the brackets and the pitch of the roof and the depth of the cornice are all based on those plans. So they will be very accurate, very close to what was originally there. So I agree that vertical sign is a neat feature. It was something that we've seen in the old photos. That's not their intent. The applicants don't wish to include that. So right or wrong, I mean, that's something that may be in the future that they could consider. But currently that's not on their plans. But interesting point. And Mr. Chair, I can hand that over to Mr. Keane if.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Mike Keane.
Yes.
Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Ryan has tackled that very nicely. I'll just point out that we do have SRM architects on the line if there's a need for further detailed discussion about that, but I don't have anything to add to Ryan's comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. No, it does raise that old problem of when you want to restore, how far back do you restore? And we've all got our favorite times. And you're right, Donald. A lot of people like that upright sign, and yet, it was only there for a short while. I saw a hand up there, it suddenly disappeared. Mark Villemer.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to second exactly, I think, what Ryan touched on, and Mike as well. Donald, you brought up an excellent point. It was actually a quandary that we were struggling with early on with the project. Effectively, we felt if we were at one point, we had a round canopy at the front, and we actually rather liked it. We said, oh, it's like a movie theater, and it was a fantastic design idea. However, it became apparent that we were cherry picking different epochs of restoration. And so I think your point is very well taken. And it was through, I believe, Ryan's leadership that he advised that we should effectively narrow the scope of restoration to pick a specific point. And so that was a great direction from us, because the vision of a building that was effectively not designed as its current intended use, but now we have a very strict and narrow band of this is what we're restoring to. And so certainly there's a history of what has happened since as far as renovations over the years. And so we feel comfortable that picking the 1920s era is the appropriate pick. However, as far as, and this is not part of this approval, however, as part of our design, we're going to be showcasing historical graphics inside the building of the evolution of the project, just to capture a little bit more of the history, because it is a diverse history. This building has had a lot of different functions and appearances over the years, over 100 years now.
Good. Thank you very much, sir. Other questions? Last call. Otherwise, you've made your final comments. I'm looking for a mover of the motion, which cannot be amended anyway. Jane McFarlane and a seconder. Councillor Oosterhoff, any final comments on the motion and its conditions? And seeing none, ask those in favour of the motion to raise their hands, please. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All hands are up. Good. Thank you very much. That carries. Thank you, visitors. And good luck. I think we're all watching that one. We move on to the information report on Union Park. And Ryan, I believe you introduced this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just quickly set the stage before I pass this over to the proponent, who I believe might be Mr. Keane again, to discuss the Union Park proposal. So the subject property is, as you all know, is 40 Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard, southwest intersection of Union and Sir John A. It's an 8-acre parcel, contains the former Prison for Women complex, which was originally started to be built in 1925. It took about 10 years to build the place till 1934. It ceased operation in 2000, was sold to Queens in 2007, and the property remained sort of underutilized since then and was purchased by the current owners in 2018. The lands containing the former Prison for Women was designated into Part 4 of the Heritage Act in 2007. It includes the administrative building, the center cell block building. I would note that the annex building is not included in the list of heritage attributes for this property. I would note that there are a number, and one of the aspects that the committee is, or the applicant is looking for you to consider, is that there are a number of interior heritage attributes noted in the cell block building in the designation bylaw, and that includes the cell block design found on the 3rd and 4th floors, and which is marked by its poured concrete walls, terrazzo floor, steel bars, elevated walkways, barriers, staircases, and the locking mechanism. So those are all noted as attributes currently. A portion of the property fronting on King Street, known as the West Lawn, is also included in the Kingston Penitentiary National Historic Site recognition, which contains the Warden House and, of course, the pen to the south of King Street. So through this current submission, the applicants are seeking preliminary feedback from Heritage Kingston on their conceptual redevelopment plans for the site, known as Union Park. The applicant is proposing a mixed-use subdivision consisting of 5 blocks, 4 of which are proposed for residential, mixed commercial residential uses, and 1 block for a privately owned public accessible park. And the development includes the adaptive reuse of the administration and cell block buildings of the former Prison for Women complex into a residential condominium. And in particular, the applicant hopes to understand any concerns that Heritage Kingston has with the proposed plans from a high level, the Heritage Conservation Strategy, which is attached as Exhibit D to your report, or my report, to conserve the various attributes on the site. And I should note that applications for official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and draft plan of subdivision have also been submitted under the Planning Act, and they're currently in the process of being reviewed and processed. This is to request the subdivision of the property, of course, into 5 lots, and the amendments to the city's official plan and zoning bylaw. If successful, the proposal would also require final plan of subdivision and site plan control applications. Formal or detailed HISs, heritage impact statements, will be required to review the details of the proposed buildings at that time, at the time of site plan control. And of course, future zoning amendment and site plan control for the block known as the future development block known as Block A. So, and I'm sure Mr. Keane will go into further details on that in his presentation. So I will leave the details of the proposal. We have some preliminary comments in our report. I won't go through those, but they're in your report. I would note that the proposed development will require at some point approval under the Ontario Heritage Act through a heritage permit. That will go to council for approval via this committee for consultation as a Part 4 designation. In addition to the conservation of tangible features through the heritage permit, the commemoration and recognition of various aspects of the property's past and those people who experienced it is also being considered through this proposal. And I'm sure Mr. Keene will get in, speak to some of that, but representative and commemorative and thoughtful landscaping, interpretive signage, options being considered through this. And as part of that, a heritage easement agreement under the Heritage Act is being considered as a possible option to ensure conservation and maintenance of these various interpretive and commemorative features. And of course, that would come back through Heritage Kingston for consultation when that is formally prepared. And as referenced in our report, Council has also directed staff to review and possibly update the 2007 designation bylaw for the subject property to specifically to look at those attributes. And this, of course, will come back to Council, will require Council's approval and will require consultation from Heritage Kingston, and we'll probably work through the Heritage Properties Working Group on the details of that process. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to turn it over to my counterpart, Mr. Keene, for a overview.
Good, thank you. Welcome back, Mike.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. And out of respect for the 10-minute time frame, I'm going to turn this over to our heritage expert right away. So I'm just going to point out that on the line, we have our team of heritage experts on the call today, Barry Podolsky and John Stewart. And Barry's going to do the bulk of the speaking. We also have one of the landowners with us, Nate Dornekamp. So the four of us will likely tackle questions at the end. But right now I'm going to quickly turn it over to Barry. And at the end of Barry, I'll take 60 seconds to just really highlight a few points that we'd like to bring to the committee's attention. Thank you. And I'll turn it to you, Barry.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Podolsky.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And thank you, Ryan, for that good outline of the project and the process. You have, as part of the applications for rezoning and official plan amendment, we have prepared, John Stewart and I have prepared a very detailed heritage conservation strategy for the overall site. As you know, this property will be developed in phases, and the City of Kingston has innovated here and suggested that the first step in the heritage conservation process would be to prepare a overall conservation strategy. And as Mike and Ryan have said, this will be followed up with detailed HISs for each of the blocks and each of the projects. And so if, I guess it would be Elizabeth, if you could advance to the next slide. Thank you very much. So the purpose of the strategy is a guiding document for this project. And I think that the difference between the heritage strategy and the heritage impact statement is that in each of the impact statements, we will be evaluating the effect of the proposed development on the built heritage resource and recommending mitigating measures at that point and prepared by our team. So I think it's important to understand that this is an overall direction for conservation that Heritage Kingston, or that the City of Kingston has recommended for this multi-phase project. Next slide. If you haven't already read it, we recommend that you do go through the whole heritage conservation strategy. It's a very detailed document. And what I'm going to present here just in a few minutes is the overall highlights of it. And so if we can see the next slide, please. The vision, of course, for the development is to transform a complex that was walled and inward looking to something that is pedestrian friendly and open to the city, while featuring the historic cell block and the administration building as the focal point of the whole development. Next slide. This is the site plan, which we could return to, but element number 12, which is the administrative block, is grouped or circled by a number of new buildings as a triad. Next slide. And the guidelines were prepared to really emphasize how we understand this historic place. And we have scrupulously followed standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada to provide this kind of guidance. And the heritage strategy itself fits into the idea of understanding the site, planning the site before intervening. Next slide. As heritage values of the P4W are well known, its classical architectural style, the limestone cladding, the cupola and roofs, and its contribution as a visual landmark within the penitentiary cultural landscape. Next slide. And also elements of the interior are part of the designation. Next slide. Elements that are places that were, shall we say, dark and severe in its function. Next slide. The guidelines began with looking at key views, the site layout, massing and form, and the architectural design and materiality of the new buildings, and the adaptive reuse of the former prison for women. The guidelines here, which we will go over quite quickly, next slide, have to do with how the prison is seen from Sir John Macdonald Boulevard, from various viewpoints that were considered to be of consequence, including the long view from the harbor. Next slide. This is the view at the intersection of Sir John Macdonald and Union Street, looking towards the south, where the prison is dominant and will be protected. Next slide. And also from the south, looking towards the north. Next slide. And the view looking up towards the Cedar Hedge, which is the museum. And in special attention here is that the proposed hotel has been moved towards the east in order to ensure that the skyline is viewed behind the Cedar Hedge. Next slide. And other key views, this is a view of the new public access route that will penetrate the site all the way from Union Street. Next slide. And the view from the harbor, framed by two of the proposed buildings. You can see the cupola there. Next slide. And then important things like the creation of a triad of buildings that provides the maximum number of area of open space to be able to enjoy the prison for women development in the round, with penetrations that make the site porous rather than what it originally was, which was secured and walled. Next slide. And massing and form, very, very significant thing. The new buildings are clearly going to be, a triad of buildings will be higher than the original prison for women, and therefore the recommendation is to create a podia for the new buildings that you employ the same datum line as the eve line of the former prison for women. Next slide. And architectural design and materiality. What would be extremely important is that the new buildings should have stone cladding at the bases along with glass, and that the design and proportions illustrate sympathy with the character of the prison for women. Of course, the upper parts of the newer buildings have the opportunity for greater diversity. Next slide. And rehabilitation has been selected as the conservation approach for the adaptive reuse of the prison for women. It will be a residential development, and it includes replacing the 1981 South Wing, which was not included in the reasons for designation, with a new addition, residential addition, that meets standard 11 for compatibility. Next slide. And the site plan here illustrates the intent of the site layout with the open space around the prison for women. And in detail in our report, you see the pedestrian route through the building, through the site, and the role of the southwest corner as a park space. Next slide. Next slide, please. In more detail, some of the things. Next slide. We can come back to these if you want to. And then overall, the next steps are that we encourage Heritage Kingston to provide us guidance and comments on the heritage strategy. Of course, any comments that you would like to make from what you see in the architectural material and massing forms would be welcomed. But of course, these will all be channeled towards the refinement of the designs when each of the blocks is actually developed and a heritage application submitted for each of the blocks and a heritage impact statement for each of the these developments over time. Next slide. Thank you very much. And next slide. I want to leave time for comments and for questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. Committee comments, questions? Wow.
Mike, did you want to wrap up here?
Oh, can't find Mike on my screen. Oh, Mike, yes, Mike, please go. And then Councillor Oosterhoff gets the first question. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief, just trying to, again, respect that 10-minute time. So I want to pick up on a couple points of what our ask is for the committee today. And first and foremost is the review of this heritage strategy, because the city has hired Andre Scheineman to review the report as a peer review agency. So we have heritage staff, we have Andre reviewing the document, and we would also really appreciate receiving your comments on the document, because it's going to influence the heritage impact statements for each individual block that will come forward as the application advances. The other points I want to bring up is a point that Barry mentioned very quickly, which is this idea of was a prison, it was an inward community, and this need to make it an outward community. A big factor for the prison closing was the fact that it was deemed to be not a nice place to live. You know, it was in its original design, it deprived its residents of natural light. So there are changes that we need to do to that prison building. So we would like your consideration for some of the details, such as balconies, for example, that we've proposed, because they're a major aspect of the mental improvements of well-being and living in a place like this. So we would like your individual comments on those elements as well, and I'll leave it at that. As I said before, one of the owners, Nate, is with us today, as well as our two heritage experts. So we should be well prepared to answer questions of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you indeed. Okay, Mike and Barry. So, Councillor Oosterhoff. All right, there we go.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I went first only because you want to lose that moment. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of comments. So hello to everybody. But you know, obviously, I don't know, but I'm just so impressed with this project, and I'm very excited about it. And I can't imagine it getting done. I can imagine it getting excited to see that. So I really want to, and I guess I really appreciate the public space component to it.
Yeah, you are
that will be kind of a passive place as well, even though I really want to comment on outward living to, from the inward time, and kind of a restorative approach to this development, and in concept, and intentionally doing that. And I think that's commendable and exceptionally sensitive. So I really want to commend that, and I'm sure I'll have more comments, but it's a tremendous presentation, and I see the vision of it, and the potential, and the incredible benefit it could be for our community and for everyone involved. So I wanted to say that, and we'll hopefully make a few more comments later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oosterhoff. Others to make comments? Don Taylor?
Yes, well, I'm also very impressed with the project, with the strategy, and appreciate the opportunity to visit the site and learn more about it. The applicants have been very thorough in studying the heritage attributes of the site and the building, and doing their best to optimize the views and attributes and design the building. So there's a lot to admire. I guess from the point of view of the Heritage Committee, we also have some concerns. And of course, as you know, in terms of the heritage building, the prison building, we would prefer that it not be sort of overwhelmed by tall buildings. And so, yeah, we would prefer if the new buildings were maybe only 8 stories or even 6 stories. But I think in proposing 10 stories, they're not being unreasonable given the circumstances. And we accept that what we have to end up with is a compromise between preserving what we can of the appearance of the building and making it financially possible. So having said that, I'll just be a little more specific and say that, I'm, I guess, speaking for myself, I guess I'd be prepared to say that 10 stories of the proposed buildings are acceptable, but I'm very reluctant to accept a new tall building in the Block A area, because I think it's important to keep the whole vista of the prison building available to the public coming down Sir John Hay or going west on Union Street. So what, in my opinion, what I'd like to see on Block A is maybe a 2-story plaza with restaurants, medical, commercial, that sort of thing, so that the view of the main building, in particular the cell block, is easily available to the public. So referring to the building itself and the proposed preliminary drawings, personally, I'm again quite comfortable with giving up the interior attributes. I understand there's an intention to maintain some presence of some of the elements, in the basement area, so that or something like that, so that people can see some evidence of the prison environment. What does concern me are the scale of the balconies, because they're rather obtrusive, and the view of the exterior prison walls and fenestration are important attributes. And I'm concerned that these large balconies will seriously compromise that. Personally, I would say I'm quite prepared to accept modest size, fairly transparent balconies, but what is being proposed is really adding an extra room to the condominiums. And I think I would have trouble with that. And so I guess I have a sort of couple of questions to end with. When I looked at the site and at the location of the park area, which is quite flat and used to be I guess the warden's tennis court or something like that. Of course, it used to be very different. It's probably a quarry at one stage, so it's all been rebuilt. And it occurred to me that if it was a lot of landscaping involving lowering that flat area, gentle curves, you get much better view from the interior of the block down to the harbor and to the lake. So it's at the moment you can hardly see it because it's quite a wide flat area. Anyway, that's just a suggestion. I'm sure you've considered alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Jane McFarlane.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. When, probably for Ryan, when do you anticipate amending the designation bylaw? And would that proceed through the Heritage Properties Working Group and then come to Heritage Kingston?
Ryan, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly. Whenever we look at changing or putting new designations together, we typically almost always run it by the Heritage Properties Working Group. So I would envision something of this magnitude probably going through that same route. At this point, we're still at an early stage of this whole project from our all relative perspective. So I can't say for sure when we get to updating the designation bylaw. It's something that I guess it depends on how this proceeds. So we'll keep you informed, Mr. Chair, but I can't commit to a specific timing on whether we do it earlier or late.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You had another question, Jane?
Yes, and when would Heritage Kingston see the peer review by Andre Scheinman?
Anybody know the timeline on that? We're looking some way ahead, I presume. Okay, my answer stands then, some way ahead.
Some way ahead, okay. And
sorry, Mr. Chair, I do see that Mr. Keane has his hand raised to respond.
Oh, Mike, okay, sorry.
Well, that's okay, Mr. Chair. We are actually anticipating that Andre will complete his review in the month of October. So I would anticipate that document will become public in the next, call it 2 to 4 weeks. So very soon we should know his input, and I see staff are actually maybe piping in. So hopefully I'm not overcommitting there, but I think it's very soon.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Campbell.
Hopefully you can hear me. I've been having some audio issues.
Yep.
Can you hear me,
Yep.
Peter? Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And through you, I just wanted to add to that and kind of reinforce what Mike just shared. We are expecting Andre to complete his draft of the peer review or his draft peer review, and then staff will have an opportunity to review his review and offer comments back. So yes, we are looking to finalize that in the next several months. I don't want to commit to a specific timeline or window on that because it would obviously be inappropriate to do so. And also I don't want to misguide the committee on when specifically they will have that. However, Jane, I can confirm that once it's complete, it does become part of the public record associated with the process and the site. And so obviously will then be available for anyone who would like to review it as part of the proposal.
Good, thank you. Jane, you had another question?
Yeah, it's actually for Jennifer again. So is it possible to circulate that to Heritage Kingston just so that we don't miss it? I know it's part of public record, but we'd have to access it and everything else.
Yeah, I think we can help to coordinate to make sure that Heritage Kingston is kept up to speed on all of the new developments and submissions that come in that are part of the public package. So I don't just mean to that Heritage peer review, but there are maybe other document submissions that may be of interest to the committee. And I think the development group would certainly like to have the committee see whatever is coming in as part of those public submissions as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. And regarding comments that any comments that we have, how do you want those formatted? Do we send them to Ryan? Is it going to go on Dash? I think we just need to make that clear for Heritage Kingston members.
Okay, Ryan, how do you want to do that?
Mr. Chair, I'm good with either route. If the applicant or if the committee members want to upload comments in Dash, I will certainly get notice that that's done. It might be just as simple, given the nature of this, to email it to me directly, and then I can ensure that the programs get it.
Okay, so emailing is probably the easiest in this case, and it won't get lost in the massive documents that will go on Dash. Good, thank you.
And finally,
do you have any more questions, Jane?
Not a question, perhaps a question. I wanted to comment on the balconies proposed for the administration building. My general feeling, looking at standards and guidelines, is that that's not particularly appropriate, especially on the administration building, or maybe they need to be scaled back. My other concern is turning the main entrance into a balcony. And I just want to put that out there right now. I think that because this is the main entrance of the building, it also is kind of against standards and guidelines about repurposing main entrances. So I think that I would definitely want that to be looked at to see what else could be done there. And having a terrace as opposed to an entrance is probably not the most appropriate thing in my point of view. My other question is about the windows and how they're being altered on the cell block. And I know that looking at standards and guidelines as well, it's all about, not having floors crossing across windows. And I can't tell from looking at what you've got there, what's going to be happening to alter these windows. So if anyone could comment on that, or if you can provide more information at a later date, that would be great.
Mike, do you want to comment on that, or Barry? Floor levels and windows, or have you got that far yet?
I think that that's still under development, but I think that that should be a detail that is reviewed during the development of each of the designs. But certainly, having tabled it today, that's something that the architects will be conscious of. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. Yeah. Jane, any more?
That's it. Thanks.
That's it. Good. Others? Donald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So just some high level thoughts. It's very hard to get down into all the details. I first of all, I want to commend the applicant. I mean, this is just an immense undertaking, and it's not my first time looking at it, but it's just very impressive the way it's gone about. The high level concerns I can actually sort of context in the way that I'm very familiar, being from Victoria, BC, engaging the Empress Hotel, and this idea of what is public and what is private, and how a site or how a very historic building works that way. And so there are some high level things that I had thought should be explored, and then maybe a few down in the weeds a bit. But so solitude for the site seems to me very important. And the overall design seems very sort of ordered and streamlined, etc. And one of the really cool engagement things about the Empress Hotel in Victoria is that you can find these hidden places within the site, so that you're right up against the historic structure, but you're also sort of in an undiscovered area. And they use bushes and landscaping and planting and slopes and different things to do that. But they also manage the way they move their whole site and the buildings themselves. They manage that sort of interchange of public and private really well. I think it's very interesting that the new buildings will have this immense overlook. So you'll have this sense from the site of being watched all the time, which is kind of an interesting engagement aspect to its historic use. I didn't get the village feel as much from the overall design. It feels very much like a very cored area, a very sort of commercial area, and it seemed to have less of that village feel. And I don't know if it's all the straight lines of the pathways, etc., or the very ordered architectural drawing trees, but it just felt like it needed more flow ins and outs and curves and different things going on, a more vernacular quality to it. One of my concerns is the public. If you look at the Empress Hotel, which has renovations off the back and off the side, and I context it with this, the public is really coming to see the heritage portion of the building and not just necessarily the facade on Sir John A. And so right from the first time I saw these plans, I wondered about how accessible is it for the public to encounter the heritage building from multiple directions and views and feel it's still a heritage building. So an example with the balconies would be, and I with total respect that architects and very, very skilled people have to look at this, but for example, if you're able to prepare more length of wall by pushing all the balconies strategically together in one area, so like at this end, for example, in a simplistic view, for one unit and then at this end for the other unit, so they're both in the same place. And if that preserves a lot more length of wall and possibly the back section more, and then the landscaping can create an area of solitude for people, then when the public come to engage that space, recognizing I think it's block B is a residential, when the public comes to engage that, I think it's richer for the public that they find this sort of secluded solitude place where their views maybe on multiple directions is very heritage. And so that was one of the things that came up, because people, the most public section is the hotel area, and I'm not positive that's what people are coming to engage. And I think the park and the overlook of the harbor is a wonderful area, but again, I question if that's why the public are really coming to engage. And I think I'll leave it at that, but those were my initial very, very high level perspectives that I was hoping that maybe the plan could incorporate to some degree.
Okay, thank you very much, Donald. Others to comment? And Councillor Doherty, I know you have to leave pretty soon. Without doing a quick switch of the chair, I would add my comment about the balconies. I think what has been said is absolutely right. I think they need to be looked at. But otherwise, seeing nobody else, go to the public. Anybody in our public gallery who wishes to speak? If you can raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, we do have a hand raised by Shirley Bailey.
Okay, Mrs. Bailey.
Good morning again.
Morning again.
Thank you for that presentation, or those presentations. I have to tell the committee that Barry Podolsky very kindly provided a session to the membership of the foundation. It was very well received. The proponents also took the board on a tour of both the building and the site. So we have, the royal we, that is the foundation, I think, is very impressed with the proposal. And I mean, we do have some reservations. I mean, as you've heard from other of the committee members, but I've also noted that the committee seems to be very impressed with what is being proposed, and it's incredible to have this P4W building adaptively reused in the future. We really look forward to that. We do have the foundation has some reservations about the height of the proposed. The 10 stories seems to be a lot. There's a lot of use of the term about the buildings encircling the P4W, and so that the building, the Prison for Women building, can actually breathe. And I think that's important. That's a really important element. But I do agree with what Don Taylor has said, that the view of that Prison for Women building, as you come down Sir John A, for example, which is slightly sloping, that to put a 10-story building or two 10-story buildings on block A, I think would be really unfortunate. So, but we are certainly looking at all this material in great detail, and we've provided comments at the public meeting which came to Planning Committee. So I would say so far so good. It's very impressive. I think there will probably be some adjustments to the proposal over time, and we look forward to seeing what happens with this application. It's quite commendable. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Shirley Bailey. Other public comments? And I am not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Chair, I'm not seeing any further hands, but perhaps I can just do a final call, because I do know there are a couple here that might have wanted to make some comments. So if anyone wishes to address the current subject, if they could please raise their hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. And Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any further hands. Oh, I see Mr. Keane.
I've got Mike Keane's hand, yeah, but that's the only one. I wasn't looking at him as public at present. I don't see any others. So Mike Keane.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chair. I actually would like to just turn it over to one of the owners, Nate Dornekamp, for a minute, just to talk about some of the design exercise, because he can speak to some of the details on the balconies, just to leave the committee with some of the thoughts that we've put into it already, and certainly very appreciative of the comments so far. But I want Nate's the closest to the architects at this moment, you know, as he's been working very closely. So I just wouldn't mind if he would pipe in for a minute. Nate.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all the positive feedback. This is what we're here for. I also like to take this opportunity to thank staff and both the past Heritage Committee and this Heritage Committee, who both have been through the building. Staff's specifically the Heritage side of staff has been through a number of times, to the point I think if Ryan goes through one more time, he should bring a broom and maybe start working. But to speak to the balconies, this has been, we've been 3 years in the design of this. The balconies have been through a lot. They've been orientated a different number of ways, and we've landed on this balcony location and the balcony size for several different reasons. Outdoor space is important, especially the current climate we're in right now, the mental health side, and the size of the balconies are important. We want to give people proper outdoor space to either, we're going to have built-in barbecues. We want space for small plantings, herb gardens, seating. We don't want them to be so small that they just become outdoor storage. We start to see bikes and storage containers on them. And as far as the use of the balconies, there's a design component. Most of the groups we've toured through here, one of their first comments is the roofing material of the admin building and the range building. And we have really wrestled with the idea of how we can maintain that and not penetrate it, not disrupt it, because it's a very proud feature of this building. So what we've landed on is using the balcony structure, using the floor space as an exit point for things like plumbing vent pipe, kitchen exhaust, and other exhaust components. So on the mechanical side, so that we don't have to penetrate both that wonderful roof as well as the limestone facade, is that we can come out in the balcony space and use that to avoid some other intrusive features. So I thank you again, and I'm welcome to all these comments. But I just want to give a bit of context on the balconies. It's a little more than just putting balconies on. So thank you.
Yeah, we know. Thanks very much for that. Anyway, looking for any other speakers from the public, and this time not seeing any members of the committee. Last chance. Okay, otherwise, thank you, folks. I know we're going to see you back regularly, and I think the committee really appreciates what you've done and the way that you've presented it. And I guess I can say best wishes, because we'd love to see this property, something done to it. And you've got a vision there that hopefully will work. So last thoughts from anybody? And seeing none. Okay, thank you, folks. We move on to working group reports, of which there are none. Emergency approvals, Ryan?
None to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Motions, I have none. Notices of motion? And seeing none. Other business. I asked for Princess Street United Church to be put on, and this is me. So I've got 4 questions, and I apologize for those of you who were not on the committee a year ago, that there is a reference to what you can find out what happened. We gave approval to a Princess Street United Church application in October 2020. While the printed minutes do not show it specifically, the recording on YouTube shows that about minute 45, this committee was threatened by the applicant, who stated that the application would lose the funding necessary to complete the hub if the committee did not approve the demolition of the designated manse, which had to be removed by December the 31st, 2020. And previously to that, each committee member had, I believe, given his or her support for the concept of the hub, but some had serious concerns about the proposed demolition of a designated building without a full investigation into the necessity for the demolition. Now, whether or not the threat was effective, I do not know, but the proposal was approved by 5 votes to 3 and subsequently was approved by council. However, since then, I do not believe anything has happened. The manse still stands, and I've not heard of any money being cancelled. So I'd like to ask staff 4 questions with answers to come to our next meeting. I don't need them right away. Firstly, what is the status of the funding? Has it indeed been cancelled? Secondly, what is the status of the application if one reason for which it was approved, demolition by December the 31st, 2020, was not true? Should the application be started afresh? Thirdly, what is council's process of dealing with threats, substantiated or unsubstantiated, made to committees? And since committees are a branch of council, to council. If I had threatened the applicants, I would have been asked to appear before whatever group now looks after such offences. Does the same process apply to applicants who threaten committees? And has this happened or been scheduled? And the 4th question, when will an apology be made to this committee for presenting what I believe is false information in order to receive an approval? Elizabeth has a copy of that, and I believe she is forwarding it on to staff. And as I say, I'd look forward to reply next month when they've had time to think about it. Correspondence, you've got correspondence there from the Ontario Heritage Trust, in fact 2 pieces from the Ontario Heritage Trust, plus the addendum which was sent to you this morning, 5 pieces on prison for women. Next meeting is Wednesday, November the 17th, usual time, usual place. One of these days we'll get together. I haven't met a number of you. Get back together with some. I look for a mover for adjournment. Donald, Jane, thank you very much. Those in favour, those opposed, that carries. Thank you all for your time and lots to think about. Great. Goodbye all.